In today's session, we are going to learn about the process, capacity analysis and manufacturing design. So let's begin with the definition of process capacity. When it comes to the operation management, process capacity is a maximum rate at which a process can produce a particular product or services according to the per unit time period under the normal conditions. It also represents the maximum output a system can deliver a particular product or service while maintaining its quality standards and determined by its most limiting resource, which is known as bottleneck. Bottleneck is any point in the process which limit by resources or slow down the working process. Let's begin with the next section, that is the key aspect of process capacity. The first one is the maximum output. It is the highest sustainable level of output but not considered in a theoretical maximum output. The next one is it is determined by the bottleneck, as the process has a certain limitations by resources and sometimes it will slow down the process of the capacity and ultimately resulting the or restricting the overall output. So the process capacity is limited by the resources with the lowest capacity, which is actually called bottleneck. Let's take an example. If a process has several steps and the steps that can produce the favorite units per hour, which determines the overall process capacity. Hence, it's limit the resources which ultimately slow down the capacity process and restricting the overall output. Next one is it measures what a process can do. It measures the process potential, which throughput measures, which is actually does. It means the throughput measures are actually the process through which how quickly the particular process can translate the inputs in the output. So this is how it always reveals the process potential rather than considering the throughout measures what is actually does in that particular process capacity. The next one is the influencing factors. There are various you can say influencing factors which ultimately affect the capacity. It could be the equipment and the machinery or fixtures. It could be a workforce availability. It could be the process reliability and the automation. So these are the factors which ultimately influence the capacity of a certain process who delivers a particular product or service. The next one is its importance for capacity planning. In order to understand the process capacity as it is one of the major component or a crucial component for the capacity planning, which is ultimately a process of matching the resources, that is demand, to ensure the business can meet the customer needs without any unnecessary waste. Then ultimately the main objective of the process capacity is to meet up the consumer demands without any wastage in it. And that's called, and through it could be done through the appropriate you can see capacity planning. But before understanding the capacity planning, it is very important to understand the process capacity. Let's take an example of you can say a theoretical example or conceptual framework to understand this example. Imagine a small sandwich shop with two workstations, station 1 and station 2. Station 1, it includes the sandwich assembling. That means one worker takes 40 seconds to assemble a sandwich. station 2 which deals with packaging, whereas the another worker takes 60 seconds to package a sandwich. So what would be the overall process capacity in this particular example? So let's have an overlook on this. So the process capacity calculation, that means a station 1 capacity, that the worker takes 40 seconds per sandwich. That this means they can produce one sandwich in 40 seconds, or in other words we can talk about 60 by 40, that could be 1.5 sandwich per minute. So if we talk about the per minute basis to calculate that how much they could produce on a per minute basis, it could be 1.5 sandwiches per minute. But when we talk about the station 2 capacity, the worker takes 60 seconds per sandwich. It means they can produce one sandwich per minute. But in station 1, it produce 1 sandwiches per minute. The overall process capacity means that it is limited by the resources which is the packaging station, as one you can say sandwich per minute, but in station 2 it will produce 1.5 sandwiches per minute, because process capacity is calculated on the basis of per unit time period. So in this particular example we are talking about per minute, that means per unit time period means per minute in this example. So in the station 1 is for 1.5 sandwiches per minute, in station 2 is 1 sandwich per minute. The overall capacity, which is the lower per minute capacity, that means the packaging, that is the packaging capacity under station 2 will be the overall process capacity, that is the 1 sandwich per minute. Hence the entire sandwich shop process capacity is 1 sandwich per minute. So this is how you can consider this example and easily elaborate the overall process capacity. That means out of these two stations, which is the lowest one, or which is the limiting by the resources, that could be the overall process capacity. In this example, the assembling station can produce 1.5 sandwiches per minute, but the process can only output 1 sandwich per minute because of the packaging station. So due to the packaging station, the overall capacity, process capacity is 1 sandwich per minute, and that would be the one of the appropriate example of process capacity. Now we can come up with the next important concept, that is the process selection. Process selection is one of the fundamental component of an operations management, which not only influence the company efficiency, it also influence the cost effectiveness and the overall success of an organization. It is also referred as a process choice, which is one of the major strategic decision making process of determining the most appropriate methods or techniques of how to produce a particular or appropriate or specific good or services within the organization. It is all about that how a company would choose a right path that ultimately aligns with its business goals or objectives and optimize the appropriate resource utilization. Let's talk about the process selection factors. The first one is to understand your needs. The first step of the process selection is for the organization that to gain a deep understanding of your organization needs and requirements or goals. It could include the plenty of factors like production volume, product complexity, quality requirements, and the cost constraints. The next one is to identify the process options. So once your needs are very clear, the next step is to explore a different process options. So there are plenty of options are available, but the four main options in the operations management has been given on the screen. The first one is the project processes. So it is mainly used for the unique or the one-time projects only with some specific requirements in it. The next one is a job shop processes. It is suitable for the small scale organizations where the custom production or the moderate production will be processed with its own requirements. The next one is the batch processes. It is also ideal for the moderate production volumes with some standardized you can say or qualities. Next is continuous processes. It is best for the high volume standardized production with minimum changes. And these are the four process options where the organization which always opt at the one or two depending upon the specific requirements or the depending upon the standardized production along with the minimum cost or with some you can say specifications involved in it. Next factor is evaluating the options. So once you choose any one or two options of the processes, then the next step is to evaluate the options. So each process type comes with its advantage or disadvantages. A responsibility of the organization is to evaluate these options against your organization goals, needs, and ultimately considering the factors in it like cost, flexibility, speed, quality, and accordingly they can choose or they can come to a decision making process or come to an optimal decision making. The next step is decision making. So based on the evaluation by the organization, the concerned authority could make an informed decision that which product type align the best with the organizational goals or objectives. The choice will automatically impact your operations or operational activities which are continuing in the organization. The next section is the key factors in the process selection. So these are the main key factors or main specifications that we involved into a process selection. These are the major factors which also influence the process selection, the best process selections by the organization. So the first one is the cost consideration. So understanding the cost structure is also the major you can say the factor to consider in the organization for a better understanding about the market trends, etc. So some may require a significant initial investments, some may not, or some may require a lower per unit cost. And it could be, and some others could be some sounds could be cost effective for the smaller production you can say units or operational activities. The next one is the flexibility. It also considers that how adaptable a process is to change in product specification or production quantities. So flexibility is also the one of the you can say crucial component in the dynamics market. So It is accordingly depending upon the various changes when an organization changes in the product specification or any changes in the production volume. The process could be flexible when any changes exist in the market. Next one is speed and efficiency. It is also the one of the major component to evaluate the speed and efficiency of the each process type so that it could deliver the appropriate product or services. Some may be a faster, other would be the slower, so and might be some others would be a balance between the speed and efficiency. Next one is the quality and consistency. The quality of the final product is vital. Some process could serve as a better understanding, some could not be, to maintain a consistent quality standards. And the last one is the resource utilization. Efficient use of resources, including the labor, material, or any equipment, which ultimately essential for the cost control and the competitiveness. The next important part is the process type. So there are 4 main process type. The first one is a job shop. Job shop is always refers a process of producing a wide variety of products in small units. These the processes under job, it could be flexible, it could be reconfigured for different jobs depending upon the type of the product and depending upon the you can see the main general purpose of the equipment. For example, a bespoke tailor or a precision engineer shop that creates a custom parts. So accordingly they are doing their job process and obviously categorizing a smaller parts to convert into a final product. The next one is the batch process. Batch process is also one of the process which produces a medium variety of products in moderate volumes or units or quantities. Products are moved through the process either in groups or in batches. So they are not a single volume you can say products at a time. It always carries the process in groups or in the batches, and that's why it's called a batch process. Like for example, manufacturing of vehicle components or producing the clothing products into a various you can say retailers in different regions. So when it comes or in a one retailer, the product process or you can say in the components in the batches or in the groups. Next one is the line or repetitive process. It is also another process which produces the high units or high volume of a few standardized products. And when we talk about the few standardized product, it could be assembling lines of a cars, it could be a consumer durables like televisions, ACs, etc. So the process is arranged in a sequence or in an assembling line with some specific equipment. Either it could be a car equipments, whether it could be television equipments, or with dedicated workstations, and that's called the line and repetitive process, because once the assembling lines for cars or you can say is produced, the another you can say assembling lines of the same particular product could also be processed, and that's why it's called a line process or repetitive process. Next is the continuous process. Continuous process is also another type of the process which produces a very high volume of a single standardized product. It could be a oiling, we could say, it could be a steel we can talk about, it could be electricity we can talk about. So here we are talking about the continuous process which cannot be stopped within an hour or within a 2 hours or within a day. It's a 24 hours service in a 7 days with a ridiculous specialized equipments, and that's why it's called a continuous process. And the few examples could be oil refining, steel making, and the electricity production. So this is a diagrammatic, you can say a pictorial representation, where here we are talking about the goods, type of nature of goods according to the 4 types of process, and with the specifications that according to the job, batch, assembling, and ultimately the continuous process. So these are the categories of the products where each process has comes into it, and accordingly the specifications is also been required, either it could be low or high, and accordingly the high flexibility and low process. So when we talk about job, it is we are to always talk about the high you can say you can say high flexibility or high you can say quality, etc. But when we talk about the batch, where again more flexibility could be seen, but when we talk about the continuous process, it could be a low category where the specifications is also being dictated, has been mentioned, that is low and high. So when we talk about the one product with a high volume or a high production units, it could be a high specification. But when we talk about the one of a product at one time, it could be a low specification. So if we are talking about one product with a high volume, it could be a high specification. If you're talking about one product at one time production, it could be a low specification. Same for the multiple products where the low volume exists, it is a low specification. Hence where a very few you can say single products and a moderate you can say volume, it could be a moderate specification. But when we talk about the one standardized product with a high volume, it is a high specification, and accordingly we could decide upon the high flexibility and low specifications that how it could be work on it. So this is a one of the example when it comes to the different types of the process, and accordingly the products has also been mentioned in the job. That could be the commercial printer, and for the batch it is a capital equipments, because we are talking about the assembling lines of the cars or any other. Then we talk about the assembling, automobile assembling. Then we can talk about the sugar refinery. So this is how we can drive the diagrammatic representation through the help of examples. Same, these are the services, same the 4 types and the services. One of the examples pictorial presentation which could be served in a form of the services as well. We can talk about the wedding, we can talk about the photo studio, we can talk about the another you can see school photo, we can talk about the license photo or a student license photo. And accordingly when we talk about these types of batches where the high, moderate, flexible or a low specification. It totally depends upon the type of the process, whether it would be the one time use, it could be the multiple products with the low volume, it could be a few products with a moderate volume, or it could be a one standardized product with a high volume, then high production volume. Then accordingly we can easily find out it could be a low specification, it could be a moderate specification, it could be a high specification. Or for the batch, the flexibility could be more seen because it goes into the batches, it goes into the groups, the process goes into a groups. So this is something, the types of the services we can covered in the types of the processes along with the various specifications, and specification is totally depends on the production volume. Now we can come up to the next important concept, that is the capacity planning. Capacity planning is refers to a forecasting the future demand, which could fluctuate based on the various factors like seasons, promotions, or the market scenario. It also requires a detailed assessment of the company resources, either it could be the manpower, either it could be the equipments, either it could be the facilities within the organization or within the processes, and the raw materials. It also, when we talk about the future demand forecasting and the resource assessment, the managers is always keen to take a strategic decisions to add, to remove, or to optimize the resources to meet the demand without overspending or underutilizing the resources. The main goal of the capacity planning is to demand and is to fulfill the future demands in order to ensure the efficient operations, meet the consumer requirements, and optimize the cost by avoiding the shortages or the excess stock or inventory. Let's take an example of the capacity you can say planning. The first one is the scenario. Let's take an example that what would be the case we could consider of the capacity planning. So a popular coffee shop chain anticipate a significant increase in customers during the winter holiday seasons. So when the winter vacations begins, the demand for the coffee could increases in the coffee shops. Then what could be the analysis is to be done, whether the resources are enough resources at the current period is available to fulfill that demand in the winter seasons. So that could be a capacity planning. The work of the capacity planning would begins from the analysis view. So they analyze their current resources, the number of you can say baristas, the number of brewing machines, and the available setting space. Now when we talk about analysis, okay, these are the current resources are available. So based on the current resources, the particular manager or decision maker could take a decision, and accordingly they could prepare a capacity planning based on the following parameters or aspects. The first aspect is hiring. They decide to hire several temporary baristas to handle the expected range in order, expected surge in orders. Equipments. This will ensure that they would have enough coffee beans, milk, you can say a paper, you can see cups, and of course if it necessity to give also if any additional you can say resources are available, they could also give they can also you can say may rent additional espresso machines to avoid a limiting resources. So if there is a limited resources, it will shut down the overall capacity process, and that's why they can also make a rent and additional espresso machines so that they could meet up the customers' wants, needs during the winter vacations. Next is operations. They may also create a schedule and optimize the shifts to ensure that the most staff are present during the peak hours, or you can say evening hours or the morning hours. So this is how the corporate planning decision goes on when the analysis part has been done according to the exact scenario or the case. And what would be the outcome? By planning ahead, the coffee shop can meet the higher demand and keep a wait time low, because it is very important not to wait more to the customers when it comes to the delivery part. It always keep the wait times low and maximize the revenue while avoiding the problem of having too many staffs or the machines during the rest of the year. Next section is how to manage a process of capacity to meet demand. Managing capacity to meet demand is always a continuous process of forecasting, planning, adjusting the resources that ultimately aligns with the customer needs. There are key steps which includes the forecasting demand using the historical data, assessing the current capacity including the labor, equipment, you can say the infrastructure as well, and developing a strategy. Either it could be increased capacity ahead of the demand, which called a lead strategy, or adjust the capacity more slowly as the demand changes, which called you can say a leg strategy. So the goal is to maintain the operational efficiency, avoid the bottlenecks, and ensure the customer satisfaction and fulfill the needs of the customers without any excessive cost from the over capacity. These are the key steps in the process that how it could manage the you can say process capacity to meet up the demand. The first one is the forecast demand. Just the major task is to analyze the historical data, the market trends, and the other business forecasts so that they can predict the future customer demand for the particular product or the selected products or services. Next is to assess the customer capacity. It is important to evaluate the existing resources like machinery, factory space, and workforce. Next is determine the required capacity. It's calculate the capacity, because it is very important to understand and to calculate the capacity needed to meet up the forecasting demand that aligns with the business goals. Next is developing a capacity management strategies. There are three main strategies: the lead strategy, the leg strategy, and the match strategy. When we talk about the lead strategy, it refers to increased capacity in anticipation of the future demand. That means it is when we increase according to the future demand that it prevents the delays, but it may lead the underutilized resources. Next is lag strategy. It also refers to increase capacity only after the demand or you can say has already increased. So once the demand has increased, then the capacity could increase, and that strategy is called lag strategy. Next is match strategy, a balanced approach that adjusts the capacity incrementally as demand changes. Next, you can see expect it is a utilized tools and software. It also important to employ the planning, the analyst tools so that they can help to optimize the resource allocation. It could be a track utilization and automate the adjustments into a processes. And the last one is track and revenue. Track and review. It is a continuous process to monitor the performances, the capacity usage, and as it is a continuous, in other words, we can also say it is a ongoing review process that also allows for a proactive adjustments to the plan which has been you can say decided by the decision maker whenever needed. So that is the last expect or stage that's called a track and review. Now we can come up to the next important aspect, that is a next important section, that is the capacity decisions are strategic. The capacity decisions are strategic because they have a long-term impact on the organizational ability, organizational operational efficiencies to meet the future demands of the consumers or the customers, to face off the stiff competition, and of course to maintain the overall cost. They also requires a significant long-term commitments of resources as well. And these decisions, the decisions whichever could be taken by the decision makers according to the capacity process or reviewing the capacity processes, then of course these decisions also influences the other key areas like human resources, supply chain, capital budgeting or cost structuring. So they automatically shape the organizational competitiveness, position and its long-term direction. A long-term commitment and resource allocation. Why we can call such decisions are strategic? Capacity decisions are called strategic decisions. Why? What was the reasons behind this? These are the reasons. It involves a long-term commitments. Capacity decisions are actually requires a long-term investments in the various resources. It could be a facility, it could be equipment, it could be a manpower, but sometimes it could be a difficult to change them all once implemented. Next is it requires a significant investment. The initial cost of a large capacity is a major determinant of the initial cost. Sometimes the financial analysis techniques will be used to evaluate or to assess the significant investment plans, and the various you can see in the finance, the financial analysis techniques could be a net present value, internal rate of return, to which are to be used to evaluate the alternatives of investments projects. Next is impact capital budgeting. Capacity planning is closely tied to capital budgeting, as it totally depends that how much the budget is required to meet up the customer needs. A customer, or you can say needs, or the future, or to forecast the future capital needs for things like warehouses and machinery. The next is it also be you can say strategic because it influence the other business areas. So these are the main four parts that how it could influence the other business areas. It affect the operating cost. Capacity decisions directly influence the operating cost, and in fact the companies must balance the cost of overcapacity and undercapacity. Next is shape competitiveness. The level of capacity is also directly influenced the organizational ability and competitiveness. Next is it impact the various functions. Capacity decisions have a far-reaching implication, has a long-term implications for the other parts of the businesses like the human resources, supply chain, logistic, production, scheduling, etc. The next section, the next aspect under this, which called that the capacity decisions are the strategic ones, because of the third reason, because the strategic alignment and the future readiness. It also meet the future demand. Capacity planning is very crucial when organization has to review the present and the future resources together to meet up the market demand, so that the organization could meet the future customer needs. Next is provide a competitive advantage. Strategic capacity planning could be one of the component to shape and improve the company competitive position. Next is support product life cycle. Capacity planning starts in an initial product design phase and continues through the product life cycle, which ensure the continuous strategic alignment. The next important aspect is defining capacity. There are three major types of capacity. The first one is a design capacity. Design capacity refers the maximum output rate an operation could design for, assuming the normal working conditions. Next is effective capacity. It refers a maximum output rate that can be achieved under normal operating conditions, which also considers the various factors like planned downtime, maintenance, employees breaks, or the product mix changes. It is always less or equal to the design capacity, because the effective capacity could proceed based on the design capacity, because after all it is very important to design an operation that produces the maximum output rate or at a maximum output rate, assuming that there are normal conditions. Same effective capacity is all about to achieved under the normal operating conditions while following up the various factors. Next is actual capacity, the rate of output that is actually achieved over a specified period, and that could be an actual capacity, that the whatever your operation has been designed, what would be the effective capacity that has been achieved, and the rate of output that is actually achieved during a specified period, that becomes the actual capacity. And actual capacity is totally depends on the effective capacity. Now, how to measure the capacity? There are various measures. The first one is the output measures. It is most suitable for operations who are having a lower variety of standardized products. For example, a car manufacturers might measure capacity in cars produced per day. It becomes an output measure. Next is input measure. It is more useful for operations that involve a wide variety of products and services, where it is more difficult to measure a total output in a single unit. Sometimes it is very difficult for the call center, sometimes it is very difficult for the consulting firm to measure any call records per hour, to measure a billable hours per week when it comes to the consulting firm. And input measures are to be prepared to measure such capacity when the calls are to be measured on the per minute per hour basis. Same for the consulting firms. Input measures are to be considered to measure a billable hours per week. So these are the measures to estimate, to calculate the capacity based on the goods and services, depending upon the number of time period. It could be hour, it could be week, it could be second, it could be minute, it could be months. The next one is a throughput, you can say capacity. When we talk about the throughput capacity, or it is also throughput measures. Throughput measures are those measures that how the process could quickly convert the inputs or specific inputs into a reliable output. So it refers the actual rate at which the system or the process or the capacity process generate the value adding product or output. It can be limited. It can be limited by bottlenecks. Some limiting resources are always available which slow down the capacity, and of course that could be a slowest points in the process. That could be a slowest, that could be you can say stages in or steps in the processes. Let's take an example. In the sandwich shop, the rate at which they can make bread might be a bottleneck. That's true, because sometimes limiting resources are to be available in terms of timing factor, because it refers it in the rate at which they can make bread might be a, you can say, bottleneck, because we are not more aware, we are not more in knowledge that how much the rate is to be estimated, is to be measured, through which the bread making process could begin, and that could be a bottleneck. It will make down the whole process slow. And of course, on the other hand, it is also required to determine the maximum number of sandwiches that can be made. So it is in this example, a limiting factor, you can say, could slow down the process, but on the other hand, it is also, if we determine the maximum number of sandwiches that can be made, we can easily prepare the bread, you can say, in a particular in a few minutes or in a few hours. And that could be throughput measures, that how we can generate or how quickly we can generate a value adding product. Next is developing the capacity strategies. Developing capacity strategies refers a 5-step process. It could be assess the current capacity, forecasting demand, identify the gaps between the two, and then implement the strategies to bridge those gaps. And there are various strategies which I've already mentioned earlier as well. It's called a lead strategy, it's called a lag strategy, and the next one is match strategies. There are also other key components include that utilizing the planning tools, collaborating with the other departments, aligning the capacity planning with the overall, or that aligns with the business goals. So these are the 5 stages which we can work on. That could be assess the current capacity. It is very important for the organization to assess the current resources, including the workforce, machinery, facilities, etc. Next, once we assess the current capacity, the next stage is to forecast the demand, forecast the future demand. Next, once we forecast the future demand, we need to identify the gaps, that we compare the current capacity with the projected or with the future demand, and in order to find out the areas where the organization have a shortfall or any excess. Next is develop strategy. So once the organization identify the gaps, now accordingly based on the gaps or based on the scenario, the organization or the decision makers could begin to develop the strategies. It could be a lag strategy, it could be a lead strategy, it could be the match strategies. So it is a duty of the organization to implement the strategies to address the identified gaps. It could be investment in any equipment, it could be hiring a more staff, it could improve the operational efficiency through the various techniques like you can see the resource leveling, etc. Next is monitor and adjust. Once we continuously track the progress or the real-time matrices, make adjustments accordingly whenever needed in order to ensure that the plan remains effective. Types of capacity development strategies. These are the three main types: lead, lag, and match. So I have already explained these three types earlier. The same concept follows in these, basically the concept under the capacity development strategies. So where the organization could decide, depending upon the market scenario, depending upon the operational efficiencies, the strategies, or depending upon the gaps that exist between the organizational ability and the available resources, the strategies could be used. Other important consideration that the capacity should aligns with the business goals, that it ensures the capacity strategies supports the company goals and objectives. Then use the planning tools, utilize the various information technology tools or statistical tools, softwares to help you to optimize the resource allocation, automate the adjustment accordingly, and gain more insights into a usage patterns of the processes or process capacity. Next is collaborate internally. So work with other departments like sales, accounting, human resource. It could get a better idea for forecasting and to understand the potential risks exist in the future and present. Next is consider the bottlenecks. It is very important to identify and plan for potential constraints or the bottlenecks, that what are the factors which slow down the capacity process or restrict the resulting output. That is very important to figure out in the processes which could slow down your production. The next important concept is the capacity planning process. It forecasts demand, assess the current capacity, identify the constraint, develop the scenarios, implement the changes, and monitor and adjust. So let's have a small overview of these topics. Assess the current capacity, which is very similar when we talk about the capacity development strategies. Forecast the future demand, identify the bottlenecks, and develop a strategy. Then we talk about the next is track and review that strategy, whether it is useful for the organization or not. That means it implement the solution, then we can monitor and optimize you can see the strategies, whether it could cope up the ongoing alignment between the capacity and demand, and to prevent the underutilization and over allocation of resources. So it is very important to consider these steps when a particular organization begin a corporate planning, capacity planning process, and the process to be followed in these 6 stages. The next is manufacturing process or a manufacturing capacity process. Manufacturing capacity process is the maximum output a facility can produce within the given time period, considering the various resources like land, labor, material, and equipment. It is also expressed in units per hour, per day, per week, and sometimes it is very crucial for effective production planning, accurate customer lead times, and the cash flow forecasting. So it is equally important to understand that under the manufacturing capacity process, it is being expressed in units per hour, per day, per week, and accordingly the labor turnover, the waste turnover could be calculated based on these aspects like per hour, per day, per week, etc. What would be the purpose of the manufacturing capacity? It improves the production planning and scheduling. It provides the customers with accurate delivery estimate. It also forecasts the cash flow more effectively and also identify the factors which slow down the production. How to calculate? It is calculated using a very simple formula based on the maximum output of machines, hours worked, and the available materials. And the formulas which could be shown in the stages of the manufacturing capacity. How to perform a manufacturing capacity analysis? First, to define the scope and gather data. To designate the production area where the production is to be goes on, what would be the areas to be decided on which the product line could analyze. Next is gather benchmarking data. Gather benchmarking data. It refers to collect the data on machine speed, downtime, either it could be planned or unplanned, or quality losses. Next one is to determine time to produce. For each product, it is also important to calculate the average time it takes to produce a single unit by dividing the total operational hours by the number of products produced. This is very also important to calculate the time, and the formula is total operational hours divided by the number of products produced. Next is calculate the effective capacity. Identify the non-productive hours, whether to track the time spent on setup, cleaning, and preventive maintenance. Then calculate the effective capacity, subtract the non-productive hours from the total available hours. So if the total available hours are 100, then non-productive hours are 20 hours, then subtract and becomes the 80 hours. And 80 hours could be our effective capacity. Measure machine hour capacity. Multiply the number of machines by their available working hours. So when whatever the 80 hours left, whatever 4 machines would be there, so 80 hours into 4 along with the number of hours, that is 80 hours. So we can easily get the machine hour capacity. Calculate the production capacity. Use the formula production capacity is equal to machine hour capacity by time to produce one product. So if we talk about the time taken for producing one product is you can say 12 hours, and the machine hour capacity it's 8. So if we divide the 8 by 12, we will get the production capacity. And the last one is to identify the bottlenecks and the calculate utilization. Identify the factors which slow down the production process. And how to calculate the capacity utilization is compare your actual output to your maximum potential output to find out the capital utilization rate. Using the formula, capital utilization is equal to actual output minus maximum potential output into 100. For example, if 800 units is actual output and 1000 units is maximum potential output into 100, that becomes the 80%, because when we talk into 100, it could be in percentage as well. And the last one is analyze and use the result. It diagnose the issues. Analyze the downtime to understand the reasons, like it could be a manual error or a quality issue or equipment failure, to identify the areas for improvements. Forecast demand. Project the future demand to compare against your current capacity and identify the future gaps. Develop a plan. Once you analyze the exact scenario, you can create a plan for optimize the production, manage the resources, and align the capacity with the projected future demand. And the last one is how to perform a manufacturing capacity analysis in your business. So it totally depends upon that what sort of scope of your analysis going on. Identify and map out the steps and cycle time for your each step of your production process, and then calculate the machine hour capacity using the formula. Machine hour capacity is equal to the number of usable machines into hours employees can use machines. And finally, calculate the overall production capacity and utilization rate, which has been explained in the last slides. Thank you so much for listening this lecture. I will come up to a more interesting, relevant, and important topics in the upcoming sessions. Till time, thank you and namaste to all.